In most parts of the world, due to lockdown, most of the transmission that's actually happening in many countries now is happening in the household, at family level. In some senses, transmission has been taken off the streets and pushed back into family units. Now we need to go and look in families to find those people who may be sick and remove them and isolate them in a safe and dignified manner.
This is Dan Dix here reporting for Press for Truth, and the clip that you just saw was of a World Health official making the announcement that they may soon have to enter your home in order to remove family members who are sick and to isolate them elsewhere. Literally coming into your house soon may be the future, and separating family members from one another, the ones who are sick being forced into a separate quarantine zone. And this obviously begs the question, how are they potentially going to enforce something like that? Well, we see here now in Canada in particular, things like this. 85% of Canadian troops ordered into isolation to prepare for COVID-19 operations. Nearly 60,000 of Canada's 68,000 troops are now in isolation in advance of COVID-19 operations, Canada's top soldier says. Many of them have been ordered to do so to be ready to deploy across Canada, get this, to assist civil authorities to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. And joining us on the line right now to help us understand the ramifications and the implications of all of this is our good friend Josh Sigurdson of World Alternative Media. He's actually also a man who fled to Mexico just in the nick of time, leaving his current home state of Las Vegas that is now under strict lockdown, and you got out of there just in the nick of time. So we'll talk a little bit about that, Josh. But before we do, I think this might be the first time I've had you on since this whole the pandemic has been announced. So I want to ask you something I've been asking a lot of the guests I've been having on in this post-COVID-19 world, which is, what is your reaction to the so-called pandemic? And not in regards to the virus itself, but more specifically, what are your views on the government's reaction to this pandemic?
It is absolutely extreme, and with a capital E. I mean, what we're witnessing today is unprecedented. It's something that we've all warned about for many years, but the actual level at which they are implementing these insane power grabs is like nothing we've read in sci-fi books. I mean, I wake up every morning, I look at the news, and every time, no matter how ready I am to see something ridiculous, I open my news on my phone and I just go, wait, what is this? What's going on? This is insane. What we're witnessing with the government crackdown, what we're witnessing with the economic, like we're looking at a global depression right now, the likes of which we've never seen before, times 100. I mean, the Great Depression looks like child's play. To me, I think we're going to be in the near future comparing other economic crises to this. Not to the Great Depression, not to 2008. Those will all look like a walk in a park, which, by the way, you're not allowed to do in most places right now. Walk outside. I mean, the fact that people have so willingly given into this really shows how powerful the media is. And unfortunately, in this case, it's in the wrong hands. I believe that we are witnessing possibly the greatest power grab anyone has ever seen in history, and the actions of the World Health Organization speak to that greatly.
Yeah, well, I mean, now they're to the point of announcing that they may potentially have to enter your homes. This is the last kind of the bastion. This is the last place that families can feel safe in this crazy time. And now the government is essentially saying they may enter your home and presumably forcefully have someone removed. Do you think that's crossing the line when it comes to government overreach into this whole situation?
To say the least, yeah. I mean, look, I've often said that no one even owns property to begin with. If they're paying property taxes, you don't own your property. There's already a massive communist overreach into property rights to begin with, as well as your ability to walk from point A to point B. There's big restrictions there that are very communist. The government has promoted this myth of public property for a long time, which basically is them saying that all this land from your house to your friend's house that is ours. It's a big collectives, and you don't own that land. We get to decide what you do on that land, but we'll give you a few rights here and there that make it look like you have the ability to, oh, well, maybe I can film in public. You can't even do that. I mean, they make you get permits and stuff for that. But what I find crazy about what they're talking about, the World Health Organization, is that this is, like you mentioned, the last bastion. This is the infringement of property rights. We're seeing that in Canada with the attempt to completely take over property and give everyone free rent, which sounds great when the government's kicking you out of your job and making you, unemployed. But it also brings to question, how can they do that, and what does that entail? Well, that entails them owning your property, them having control over your property. We're seeing all over the United States right now, the National Guard being deployed and doing door-to-door checks to split up families. Now, the World Health Organization is talking about doing this. This is a global government, and a piece of a global government, the World Health Organization, that prides itself on communism, that is basically trying to follow China, which I believe is taking over to a T. And we have to remember that the WHO director, Tedros, was a top member of the violent Ethiopian Communist Party, which murdered people. And now he's over there at the World Health Organization telling everybody, what should be done worldwide, and advising the world, which, by the way, I can't help but think, I've been reporting on coronavirus since December. I can't help but think of the initial reaction by the World Health Organization, where they said this won't be an issue at all. No person-to-person transaction. Don't wear a mask. Hug a Chinese person day. Don't worry about it. And then it blew up, snowballed, and now they're utilizing this to control and enslave the populace and imprisoning people in some cases for walking down the street. Now they come to your home. Is there no sacred place anymore? Is there no sacred place? And that's what I'm seeing here, is that they want to be able to come into your home like a bunch of Nazi, jackboot thugs, or perhaps like you saw in the USSR. There will be no family. There will be no community that is not a part of jurisdiction of a massive cartel, which is a government. And there is no relationships. There's no private life there. Everything is public. It's a collective. And you become a pawn that can be easily sacrificed for the sake of the king and the queen. And honestly, to me, that has always been the end game. And it's just happened so incredibly fast.
Well, what do you think about the current militarization of this plan, where, as you said, National Guard is being rolled out in the United States? As we saw earlier in this video, Canadian troops are mobilizing. Upwards of 60,000 of them now are getting prepared to assist the authorities. Where do you think this is leading to? We've already seen other countries in flat-out martial law, but where does this put us here in Canada, when we're literally going to soon see 60,000 troops on the streets enforcing COVID-19 rules? What does that tell you?
Well, I mean, when Ron Paul said years ago that we should bring our troops home, he did not mean and put them in the streets and point guns at the heads of all Americans or Canadians alike. What we're witnessing today is the global totalitarian agenda being played out right in front of us. It's martial law. It's full scale. You did the film Into the Fire, which was brilliant. That really displayed the police state and, the idea of martial law being implemented and how it reacts, or, how rights react with martial law. What we're seeing today is global martial law. Generally speaking, most countries in the world are taking part, and it means military in the streets. It means you go for a walk. You could be thrown in jail for a year in places like Virginia. You could be thrown in jail for a year in places like Maryland. Across Canada, they're trying to hike up taxes like crazy, print insane amounts of money, and put military on the streets. And you combine all those things together, and it's a perfect communist wet dream, which is why I've been trying to warn people about being prepared for so long, because this comes from dependence. People are like, oh, well, I feel comfortable seeing the military in the streets because I'm scared about what might happen, because the government released a virus, and then it didn't break out as much as they wanted to, so they crack down on everyone's rights and try to inflate the numbers. Then they end up forcing people into their homes. Then they kick them out of their jobs so they can't make any money. Then they aren't allowed, they're rationing food, they're withholding it. They're fear-mongering in the media. They're fear-mongering in what was left of the public school system. And then on top of all that, when people beg for help and say, I don't know how to take care of myself. I'm a millennial. I'm one of this new generation of dependent people who had nothing but good times my whole life. What do I do? And people like us were saying, you should stock up, you should do this and this and this. Now it's almost too late. There's barely any stores that actually allow you to stock up anymore. They're banning seeds from being bought in many places that allow you to grow your own. They're forcing you into your home. And then you say, well, what if there's riots in the streets? What if people, as you can imagine, they need to feed their family, start shooting and breaking into homes to get food because they weren't prepared? The military is there to save you. Well, there you go, the final cog of this massive global system and the totalitarian system that so many people have asked for. Well, you got it, folks, but many of us didn't want it. And now we're enslaved to this system. And this is exactly why I left the United States in the first place, because it terrifies me, the thought of, my freedoms are my responsibility. And it's important for me to mind those freedoms. It's not about nationalism or anything. It's about me and my loved ones and taking care of those people around me. And I did what I could to escape that. But honestly, this is a final cog in that massive global agenda.
Yeah, I was going to ask you a little bit about that, getting out just in the nick of time and going to where you are now. I think was a pretty good move. Just tell people a little bit about that. You obviously saw some of the signs, you saw the writing on the wall, and you decided to pull the trigger and just go for it. And then the very following day, there was pretty much lockdown, right? Tell us a little bit about how that went about.
So the way it's worked for many years for me is, like I mentioned, it's freedom is about responsibility. It's about me taking action in my own life, not asking the government to help me, not asking anyone else to help me. I am in charge of my own life. I am independent. I am trying to take care of myself. And I left Canada years ago because I felt, in Las Vegas, you can have guns, you can do all there's not as many SJWs and stuff like that. And I'm like, it sounds like a better idea. I go there, and then obviously they start cracking down in ways that, we all knew was going to happen eventually, but it became a fast incremental move when they started saying you can't walk outside, which they still can to an extent in Las Vegas. It's not as bad as many other places, but I knew what was coming. I see California, they're saying prison sentence for walking outside. They're claiming mass graves in places like New York. And I knew, this isn't freedom. I don't believe that this is going to be good for me and my health and my loved ones to be in this spot when this is all happening. Global totalitarianism is not a good look. And I knew that I was going to go to the Middle East anyway. There's areas of the Middle East that are very free, believe it or not. The news won't tell you that. And then they shut down my ability to fly everywhere. And the one place left was Mexico. And so I looked at plane tickets one night as Las Vegas was shut down, as they closed the casinos, as they closed the hotels, and it looked like a zombie apocalypse on the Las Vegas Strip. Within 6 hours of seeing the Las Vegas Strip, I was on a plane flying out. I wasn't expecting to be that night, but I knew that I had to make a move soon, because if you wait another week, they could close the borders, and anything could happen at this point because they have the whole populace in fear of their grandmother dying. So I jump on an airplane, I book an Airbnb. It's incredibly cheap. I jump over to Puerto Vallarta in Mexico because it just had a good price. And it just happens that Puerto Vallarta has been one of the most free places in the world during this pandemic, with very few shutdowns, and the shutdowns being voluntary. The biggest thing that's hurt us here in Mexico is that they have the Canadian government and the US government told people and demanded they go home or else. The Canadian government said that if people did not return to Canada immediately, they would lose their health insurance that they've already paid for, their travel insurance. And they just threatened these things, people who paid for this in the first place. So all these Canadians rushed to the Puerto Vallarta airport. It was flooded with almost 10,000 people at one time. There are people going out the door, panicking, all these gringos running back to Canada. And myself, the whole time, I'm like, you're just running to a camp. Like, this is a prison camp you're running to. Maybe it's not the same scale yet, but I mean, seriously, what the incremental moves we're seeing are so fast. They're hardly incremental anymore. This isn't a slow frog boil anymore. This is complete global totalitarianism. And all I saw was the move towards that one world government, possibly technocracy, a Chinese-style fascio-communist global dictatorship. And I felt more free in a place that had less panic, and people who, face panic were more independent, self-sustainable, didn't just go to public school and be told to be dependent on government. People here are anarchists. Seriously, most people, they have big government here, but nobody listens to the government. Everyone laughs at the police here. Everyone laughs at the military police who go around harassing people, and they're like, here's 20 pesos, which is equivalent to $1, less than $1 Canadian. And people are like, the police are like, okay, they go away. I mean, that's great. One thing they did here, which I thought I should mention, is that they banned bars from serving alcohol unless they served it with food. So what did all of the bars here do? They're like, here's free apple slices at the door. Now you've eaten. Here's some alcohol. I mean, it's brilliant. In the United States and Canada, everyone would cower under their bed, shut down their business. And what we're witnessing right now is a global depression, the likes of what we've never seen before, and possibly 1 billion jobs worldwide wiped out. So I want to be in the place where people are more self-sustainable. There's fish in the ocean. There's coconuts on the trees. There's mountains filled with all sorts of fruits and vegetables and great abundance of fruit and food. So for me, I thought that was a no-brainer, and I feel so bad for people in so many places across the United States and Canada right now, because so many are just willingly giving into this, and they are going to be so sorry in a year from now when the whole global economy has completely collapsed.
Well, I think you made a smart move, and as you suggested before, it may be too late to start preparing now, but you said it may be, which means it may be not. So maybe we could shift focuses now into a little bit more solution orientated, because you know, people who are watching this now might be saying, yeah, you know what, I really should have been prepared and I'm not, but how do I get prepared now? So what are some of the things that people should proactively be thinking about today in order to protect themselves against the things they're seeing today? If it's not too late, where should they be focusing on currently right now on how to undo this current situation?
This is an interesting psychological issue, because it's the same thing as people selling something like Bitcoin at the top and buying Bitcoin at the top and selling it at the bottom. People panic and they do emotional things. They have emotional reactions to things. Well, it's been very frustrating, because for many years I was based on just giving people the news, telling them, don't worry too much. There's a way that you can save yourself and save your family. Here are ways to prepare. I always said food, water, shelter, and self-defense are not gathering things for the toughest guy on the block. Now, I think we're mostly out of the educational phase and more into the action phase at this point. It's hard to back yourself up, but there is a way, and people can still, in many places, go to the grocery stores, and even though they have limits, go to one, then go to another, then go to another, and get what you need. At this point, money's out the window, guys. It's health and survival, because honestly, no one has money right now. They've wiped out money for 80% of people in Canada right now. So, I mean, and everyone's been called non-essential, and it's just horrible. So at this point, if you haven't gotten prepared, it's not good, but you can still, stock up on things. Honestly, I've been telling people for a long time, do some survival training, go into the woods, but I guess it's a little late for that. The highways are largely shut down. You can't even go to province in much of Canada right now, which is insane. You can't go to your cabin to be completely isolated. So at this point, I think you need to have at least some form of self-defense. A good form of self-defense, because people will do what they need to do for their family, and if they don't have food or water and they have children, they will do crazy things, and they might break into your home if they know that you have food or they see your lights on. I know that sounds like fear-mongering, but this is a reality in a crisis, and we have to look at Venezuela and Argentina and places like that as an example of that. So being defended is important. Having some form of wealth insurance, gold, silver is important. If you don't have that already, it's going to be very difficult for you to have that. There's also crypto. You can still get that online, but many people will be against that, and to each their own. But then there's food and water, which is the most important, and that shelter above you, that ceiling above you. That is most important of all. That's what keeps you alive. It's just you need something to defend that. So I think there is hope. I'm very hopeful long term. The short term, I'm very concerned about how this is going to go. I don't see it going well anytime soon. I think it's going to get way worse before it gets better. I don't mean the coronavirus. I mean the reaction to it, which, by the way, Bill Gates has been saying that more people will probably die from the shutdowns than the coronavirus itself, but we need the shutdowns. So, I mean, just think about that for a second. Think of the irony. Think of how psychopathic you have to be to say millions dead is better than a million dead because, government. We need to be prepared, because those are the people that are in charge right now. Those are the people that are making all the public notices. The World Health Organization, the United Nations, Bill and Melinda Gates, these massive shadow government, organizations, those are the ones that are dictating what you should or should not do. And they've doomed you in the first place, folks. Are you going to let them continue to doom you, or are you going to take some action, do something about it, feed yourself, make sure you have food and water for your family? Am I still sounding crazy? Is this still fear-mongering at this point in the game? Seriously, when you have full communist control over private property, when they're talking about forced vaccinations to go anywhere or move anywhere, to go to school, to go to the store, when we're talking about a complete technocratic cashless society, communist takeover of your property, your private property, military in the streets, complete global economic collapse, is that still fear-mongering when we're in that right now? This is worse than the Great Depression already. How far does it have to go before people say, oh, maybe this is the time to do something? Maybe this is the time, before they're thrown in the cage and it's too late.
Yeah, well said, Josh. It's absolutely crunch time. We are in the thick of it. As I said before, I think we're now in a post-COVID-19 world where we're not necessarily going back to the way it used to be. Things are exponentially growing, but this is why it's important really to focus on these solutions that you've been talking about and have been for years, about how people can prepare financially, physically, spiritually, and I think those are the important things that we need to continue to bring to the table moving forward. So I would agree. Stop tuning into the mainstream. Stop listening to these officials with fancy letters after their name, and start tuning into the alternative media and the guys who are bringing you the other side of the story here. Guys like Josh from World Alternative Media and myself here at Press for Truth. Moving forward, folks, we're going to need your support so that they don't try to squash out these voices that are bringing this other view to the table. So if you haven't subscribed to Josh's channel yet, I strongly encourage you to do so. Links will be located in the description below. Josh, any final thoughts on where you see this going in the next couple of weeks and months, and what people really need to think about here moving forward?
Yeah, we've only been vindicated enough times to write a book. And if people don't listen at this point, I don't know how to help them. And I'm not helping them at this point because I'm working on keeping myself free and staying free. But I still want to put that information out there as we are facing a massive monopoly on information from the mainstream media, as YouTube videos like this are being deleted from YouTube just for talking about an alternative take. And if we cannot ask questions, if we cannot have conversations that, by the way, tons of doctors are trying to talk about as well, then what kind of world do we live in? If we have no speech, if we have no defense, if we are completely dependent, we are a slave, and we're going to be sacrificed as a pawn for the king and the queen. My answer to this is always that I think it's going to get worse before it gets better, but I believe long-term good triumphs over evil. In this time, I know it's very difficult for almost everyone watching this, and I know people are really concerned and scared, and I don't blame you. I'm a little bit concerned every time I look at my phone. I feel somewhat confident, but I get fear when I look at my phone and I see what's happening in the world, because I know millions, if not possibly 1 billion people in this world are going to be left to the side of the road. These jobs aren't coming back. It's horrible. But at the end of the day, what I think is important and what people have been talking about for millennia is this is a battle of good versus evil. At the end of the day, you should be good. Just be good and be prepared.
Well said. And mind your own damn business and stop policing one another and pointing the finger at everybody who you see not following the rules. You know what? Just worry about yourself out there, folks, moving forward. And maybe we can navigate through this in a much better way. So Josh, once again, man, thanks so much for joining us. Links are going to be located in the description below, everybody. Make sure you subscribe to his channel if you haven't already. And thanks again for joining us today, man. You keep up the great work, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Dan.
We all want truth. The truth will set you free.